Why hello and welcome to the city of Leiden. Today I will be showing you around this nice city which houses the oldest university in the country. The university was founded in 1575 right after a very turbulent time for the region. We'll talk more about that later. Now, the city is quite scenic thanks to its historic city center and many canals, although it's definitely on the smaller side with a population just shy of 120,000 people. The metropolitan area though is somewhat bigger, with as much as 350,000 people living in an agglomeration of localities centered around the city. Leiden is located in the province of Zuid-Holland, between the Den Haag-Rotterdam metropolitan area and Amsterdam. Because of that, much of the rail traffic transiting between these two massive metropolitan centers passes through the Leiden Central Station. Now for some history. Beginning in 1572, the city revolted against the harsh rule of Fernando Álvarez de Toledo, Duke of Alva and Governor-General of the Netherlands under the Spanish Habsburgs rule. The Spanish appointed Francisco de Valdez to suppress the rebellion, led by Prince Willem van Orange. In October 1573, Valdez began a siege on Leiden that would truly test the hardiness of its people. The exchange may or may not have occurred as follows. Rendiros y entregad la ciudad. Nay. Pues tocará ser. The city experienced brief respite between April and May 1574, when the Spanish prepared to confront a relief incursion led by Louis and Henry of Nassau, Willem's brothers. Unfortunately, this army was stopped in its tracks by Sancho d'Avila, and both Louis and Henry were killed by the Spanish. Willem then messaged the city to hold out. He would get the dikes breached to flood the low-lying parts of the province in order to get to Leiden by boats and drive out the Spanish army. Despite considering surrender, the city did hold. The previous sieges of Naarden and Haarlem had shown that the Spanish would massacre the citizens and destroy the city if they surrendered. The first dike to be cut was the Hoge Zeedijk, around here. But Willem fell ill soon thereafter. It was not until September that he had recovered and the expedition could continue. They, however, found their advances halted by the dike of Landscheiding, here. This dike was poorly defended and could be taken by a surprise attack at night and then breached. Their advances were soon halted again, due to the winds blowing from the east this time, slowing the flooding of the land and thus rendering all ways to Leiden impassable, except for a canal to the lake of Zoetermeer that was too heavily defended by the Spanish. It is said that at this point, Van der Werf, the mayor of Leiden, told the citizens they could eat his limbs if they couldn't stand the hunger anymore. The veracity of this claim is debated, however. On the 18th of September, the wind switched directions and piled the water up against the dikes, allowing the fleet to circumvent the Spanish defenses along the now more deeply flooded land. To Leiden they went. Prince Willem then sent patriots to breach the dikes in 4 additional locations, flooding the lands around Leiden and immobilizing the Spanish troops along the way. They stood in what were now 45 islands instead of villages. On the 2nd of October, Valdez ordered his troops to retreat, and the next day the relief fleet arrived at the city, finally feeding its starving population. And thus, the siege of Leiden was over. The city's heroic resistance against the Spanish rule was part of the reason why it was chosen as a founding place for the university the next year. It is said that when its citizens were given the choice between tax exemptions and a university, they chose the latter. During the siege, paper money was used for the first time in Europe, when the city ran out of silver. a quite interesting spot. I actually arrived at this park by accident, but it turned out to have a quite fascinating history. On January 12, 1807, a ship loaded with more than 17 metric tons of gunpowder blew up in the middle of the city. It destroyed more than 200 homes and the area was left barren for almost 8 decades. Until in 1886 it was turned into a park. This park. It's called the Van der Werf Park and you can probably guess after whom. Now, in my infinite wisdom, when I went to Leiden, I actually turned off the GPS tracking of my camera. The idea here was to save some battery by doing so, but I actually forgot to turn off the Wi-Fi, so yeah, that didn't turn out as well as I expected. Alas, this means I don't actually know where much of this footage was filmed. Yep, I had to go down that street. And this is the new entrance to the botanical garden, but my Roman friends like to call it Hortus Botanicus. I really effing like plants. Had you ever seen an artichoke plant? About 2 decades after it was founded, the University of Leiden asked the mayor for permission to build an academic garden. They called it an Hortus Academicus, which means academic garden in Latin, for their medicine students. The permission was granted in 1590 and a relatively small but very diverse garden with over 1,000 plants was set up by a famous botanist called Carolus Clusius. You see a pattern here with the Roman stuff? The garden was extended over the years, including the addition of a greenhouse for tropical and subtropical plants and the collection of plants from all over Japan.